Hey everyone, and welcome to the weekly podcast with Alexander and Ava.
All right, so welcome to the Deep Dive, everybody, where we take all of your research and turn it into something useful. And today we are diving into language learning.
Lots of sources this time.
Yeah, tons of books and articles all about how to learn a new language more effectively, and especially for beginners. I think there's a lot in here that can really help people get started, so
It can definitely feel overwhelming at first.
for sure. But I'm hoping we can kind of break it down into some manageable steps today.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the most surprising things that kept coming up in the research was the importance of mindset. You know, like your attitude going into it.
Oh yeah, I noticed that too. There was this one study in the Journal of Language Learning, I think it was, that found that learners who had a clear reason for learning, like a strong why, were way more likely to stick with it.
3 times more likely actually to keep studying for at least a year.
Wow, that's significant.
Yeah, it's not just about memorizing vocabulary. It's about having a vision for why you're doing it.
Right. Like one of the sources had this really great example about learning Spanish.
Mhm.
Like if your goal is just to be able to order tacos when you go out,
Yeah,
that's totally different than, say, wanting to be able to work in Madrid.
right. You're going to need a whole different level of fluency for that.
Exactly. So your approach will be totally different.
And one of the sources actually suggests like writing down a specific goal statement.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, something like, I'll be able to hold a 5-minute conversation about blank and blank. You know, fill in the blanks with your own interest and time frame.
I love that.
It makes it so much more concrete than just saying, oh, I want to learn Italian.
Way more actionable, for sure. So, okay, you've got your goals set. Now, what about this whole idea of immersion? I feel like that's something that trips a lot of people up.
It definitely has this like mystical aura around it.
Yeah, like you have to move to Paris to learn French.
Right, exactly. But the truth is you can create immersion in your everyday life.
Yeah, one source called it everyday immersion.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all about those little things, you know, like switching your phone's language
Yeah,
settings,
that's a good one.
or listening to podcasts in your target language while you're doing chores, even just labeling things around your house with sticky notes.
I saw one source that recommended watching kids shows in the language you're learning.
Yeah, that's a classic tip.
It sounds kind of silly.
But it works.
Yeah, because the dialogue's so simple.
Right. It's a great way to build confidence, especially when you're just starting out.
But wouldn't you be limiting yourself in terms of vocabulary? I mean, how do you balance that out with getting exposed to more complex language?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to get stuck watching Dora the Explorer forever.
Right.
So I think the key is progression, you know, like you start with the basics and gradually work your way up.
Kind of like building blocks.
Exactly. As you gain confidence, you can start incorporating more challenging material like movies, TV shows, maybe even books.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
Okay, so we're immersed, we've got our goals. But what about all those language learning apps out there? Duolingo, Memrise, Babbel, all those. I mean, they're super popular, but can you really become fluent just from using an app?
I think they can be really helpful tools, especially for building vocabulary and getting comfortable with grammar.
Yeah.
But almost every source we looked at emphasized that apps should be combined with real human interaction.
So it's not enough to just do your Duolingo lessons every day.
Right, like you do your Duolingo, then you hop on an app like HelloTalk, and you actually message with the native speaker using what you just learned.
Oh, that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, it puts it into practice.
For sure. Okay, so speaking of putting things into practice, we have to talk about the fear of making mistakes.
Oh yeah, the big one.
I know, it's such a hurdle for so many people, including myself.
It's totally natural though. I mean, who wants to sound like a fool?
Right, but one of the sources had this really funny anecdote about their early struggles with German.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
And the point was basically that everyone makes mistakes, especially at the beginning.
And most native speakers are actually pretty forgiving.
Yeah, they appreciate the effort.
Exactly.
So how do you get over that initial hump? I mean, where do you even start?
Start small. You know, like greet the barista in your target language. Comment on the weather, ask for directions.
Just little things.
Yeah, those little interactions help build your confidence and get you more comfortable speaking.
Love it. Okay, and this kind of ties into another point that I found really interesting. The whole idea of learning phrases rather than individual words.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Like, why is that so important?
Well, for one thing, it's way more practical. You know, like in real life, you're not going to just be using single words.
Right, it's more like, where's the bathroom? As opposed to just knowing the words for door and window.
Exactly. Plus, when you learn phrases, you're also absorbing grammatical structures naturally.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about setting goals, immersion apps,
Mm.
the fear of making mistakes, learning phrases. Now, let's talk about time commitment, because I think a lot of people get intimidated by the idea that they need to study for hours every day.
Yeah, it can feel really daunting.
But guess what?
What?
You don't actually need those marathon study sessions. Yeah, there's research that shows even just 10 minutes a day is more effective than cramming for 2 hours once a week.
Wow, that's encouraging.
Right, so you can fit it into your busy schedule.
Totally. It's all about those little micro habits.
One source even had some cool suggestions like reviewing flashcards while you're having your morning coffee or listening to foreign language playlists while you're working out.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, you're basically multitasking.
Exactly. You're making the most of your time.
Okay, now here's something that really resonated with me. One of the sources talked about connecting language learning to a passion project.
Oh, yeah, that's a really cool concept.
So what does that actually look like?
Well, think about your interests.
Yeah.
You know, like what are you passionate about and how can you incorporate the language you're learning into that?
So if you love cooking, for example.
You could try following a recipe in your target language.
Oh, that's a good one.
Or if you're really into music or film.
You could seek out artists or movies from a country that speaks that language.
Exactly, and you could even learn some slang.
Oh yeah, slang is fun.
It's a great way to connect with the culture on a deeper level.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here today.
We have.
Let's do a quick recap.
All right.
Number 1, set specific goals.
Number 2, immerse yourself daily, even in small ways.
Number 3, use apps wisely, but don't forget about real human interaction.
And number 4, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Everyone does it.
And most importantly, find ways to make it fun.
Inject some passion into the process.
Exactly, and remember this.
What's that?
Every polyglot, every amazing multilingual person you've ever heard of, they all started as beginners.
That's so true.
They were once in your shoes.
So if they can do it, why not you?
Why not you?
Right now, before we wrap up, tell us about one small step you're going to take today to immerse yourself in your target language.
Yeah, share your experience with us. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, everyone, happy learning.
Happy learning.
We'll see you next time.
Go.